Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. We're gonna get started here. Welcome to Perennia's first webinar of the Take Your Product to Market series. This is provided by the Agri-Food Funding Program. We're going to begin today by learning about pricing for profit and understanding margins. My name is Emily Page, and I'm a food scientist with Perennia Food and Agriculture. We offer a wide array of services to support Nova Scotia's agriculture and seafood sectors, such as food safety, agriculture extension, mobile wine bottling, and analytical testing of cannabis, foods, and beverages. Here at the Perennia Food and Beverage Innovation Center, we work with clients on product development, process improvement, nutritional labeling, and shelf life determination. First, I would like to introduce our guest presenter, Gary Morton of Morton Horticultural Associates. Gary has worked in agriculture for 40 years, helping farms and food businesses across Canada find new value, success, and profit from what they do. Pricing products is probably one of the hardest tasks for an agri-food entrepreneur to do. Gary says getting your products priced correctly will enhance how much of your products you can sell. If you get your pricing strategy wrong or are confused by margins and markups, you may create problems that are difficult to overcome. Today's webinar is a great first step to getting your pricing strategy on the right track and help you understand the language of margins so that you can get the best returns possible from your products. Lastly, just a quick couple housekeeping notes for using Zoom webinars. If you have a question during the session, please use the Q&A button, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom window, as guests will not have microphone access today. I will be monitoring the questions throughout the webinar for Gary. However, most of the questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel, so you can replay it later or share it with your friends and colleagues who couldn't join us today. Let's get started.
Thank you, Emily, for that great introduction, and welcome folks to this webinar. And I'd like to share with you today some tips on pricing for profit, and through that process we'll be understanding margins. So pricing is one of the hardest and most important things a business has to do. And I would just like to get a little bit of a yes or no from you on the chat box here. Is that what most people are finding, that they feel that pricing is like throwing darts, or that customers dictate the price all the time? And I'd just like to see the response here, just so that I can help me adjust how I'm going to present things today. You get anything coming in there, Emily?
Nope, nothing yet.
No?
Oh, we have a yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, sometimes.
Yeah.
Definitely the hardest.
Okay, that's good. Nice confirmation there. But there is no magic formula to pricing, and everybody has kind of their own little way of doing it to a large degree. But what we're trying to do is come up with some best practices for pricing here today and share those with you. When people spend, it's interesting because when people spend years developing their product, sometimes it comes down to the very end where they've just, at the very last moment, they're trying to set the price. And it really is something that needs to be thought of through the whole process, or a lot more time needs to be spent on it. So why is price so important? If your price is too high, you risk that your customers are not going to come in. If your price is too low, the big risk is they don't take you seriously, or you're in a market that you don't maybe not want to be in, and you're just not making the money that you need to. If you get the price wrong, the issue is that you could set some things in motion that are very difficult to change. It's very difficult to get a price back up if you put it too low. If you introduce a product with a high price, it may turn the market off as well. So the goal here is to, how do I get that price right? And when you get it right, it means you're going to sell more product, your business is going to be more successful, and you're going to be much happier in the long run. So just a little definition quickly here. Price is the amount of money for which something is sold, and everybody pretty much knows that. But price is also used to capture the value of the product. So what you charge for your product, or what people pay, should be somewhere equal to the value that is being received. Price also helps frame customers' perception of your product, because if it's a high value, again, like maybe it'll be pushed into a certain market, or if it's a low value, it'll be in another market as well. And it also reflects the customer value being delivered. I always like this quote because I always thought it worked well for farmers. It says, the farmer is the only man, and I'll update it, or woman, in our economy that buys everything at retail, sells everything at wholesale, and pays the freight both ways. So it's really important when we start to think about this is that understanding the price and knowing what your price for your product is and getting the best one possible is really important as for any business. Many people will say pricing is just a numbers game. And many people assume this because they know their production numbers, so they know their cost of production. They usually believe that their selling price is a markup from their cost of production, so that they're getting more than what they're selling their product for more than what it costs them to produce. And then they also often believe that raising prices is how they're adding value. So those are some of the key points that are very difficult, but it's also thinking that they know what the customer will or will not pay, or assuming that, the believing that price has to be low for them to win, and the customers only buy on price. So these are some assumptions here that lead people to think that pricing is just a numbers game. And it's much more, and I hope we can go into a few more things that I can share with you today to show that it's a bit different. Pricing is a game of perceived value. So where you're constantly working to advance your customer's willingness to pay a price that reflects the true product value. I'll give you an example here, and this is a single malt Scotch whiskey. It's Balvenie 50. It's $50,000 a bottle. Now you'd say, why would somebody pay $50,000 for this bottle of Scotch? Is it the packaging? It's pretty nice packaging, I think, if we look at that. The bottle's pretty cool. It's 50 years old. It's $50,000. Now, I would think most of us would think that's got to be the best Scotch in the world, or the best whiskey in the world, at $50,000. Well, again, it comes down to perception. Here is a bottle of Crown Royal Northern Harvest Rye, produced in Gimli, Manitoba, and it was nominated by Don Murray in his Whiskey Bible in 2016 as the world's best whiskey of the year. This product, the world's best whiskey compared to all these other ones, costs $40 a bottle. So again, it's all about perception, what people believe, what people think about something, how much they'll pay for something. That product, when we go back here, somebody's willing to pay $50,000 for a bottle of good whiskey. Here, they're willing to pay $40 and probably get the world's best whiskey. The object is to add value so the customer can't make comparisons solely based on your competitor's price. So what you're trying to do is to add value in whatever way possible to your product so that that customer is not comparing your product just on price to somebody else. There's other factors that are going to go into the buying decision. So that would lead to the question, what value does your product or business bring to your customer? How well do you know your customer is really important. So to offer value to your customer, you have to know that target customer really well and inside out. Why do they buy, or why do they not buy? And those are questions that are really important when you start to think about how you're going to price products. Why do they buy? Why do they not buy? It'll help you frame where your product's going to fit. This chart is the progression of product value, and you can see down at the bottom, on the vertical axis you have returns, on the horizontal axis you have value, and at where they intersect at the bottom, it's commodity products. And commodity products are basically getting the lowest value. And many of you have commodity products. You're competing with other products, and there's very little differentiation, so you get what the market is going to offer you. But to move up the progression of value, you need to differentiate your products. So you're going to start to make them different. How do I do that? And I'll give you some examples as we go forward. Farther up the chain, you're starting to value add, and you can see the returns get more as you go up. And then finally, the biggest return is when you can create product experiences and connections with your product that are really unique and the people are going to value And it's almost unlimited where that pricing can go at that point. And as you can see with the $50,000 bottle of scotch, there's a product experience there of buying the best scotch in the world, and somebody is willing to pay for that. I want to remind you, you get paid when you deliver value to the marketplace, and quality is, it's a given today, and value is really the price option. So basically, you have to have a quality product to be in the game, but adding more value to that quality is your real option. Here's an example of differentiation. David Bennett, Family Farm, I worked with him a number of years ago, and we talked about at the time, like in a workshop that we're having, about having to differentiate your product. And he felt at the time, he thought, this isn't going to work. I'm kind of a little bit worried trying to make my product different. But he has organic grass-fed beef, and if you can see this picture, the beef is really good looking. It tastes really good, and there's a big lineup at the Dieppe market every Friday or Saturday to get his products. So he's taken the route of differentiation. He's getting the price he wants for his product, and he's increasing the market share. Here's an idea of value adding, and this is Griffith's Farm in PEI, and they have basically taken potatoes and they've put them into small packages, and you can see here that there's 3 packages individually wrapped. And they would tell you that when they started doing this, people thought they were crazy. Like, who's going to pay $3 for 3 potatoes when you can buy a whole bag for $3? But they went forward and they've done this, and I'm a perfect example of one of their customers. There's 3 people in our family. This is just ideal. There's no waste. There's no storage that it has to go away. But this is now over half of their business, and it's turned into something very successful by adding something very simple that gave value to the customer. Memorable experiences. And this picture is at Saunders Farm in Munster, Ontario. And they're a strawberry farm, but they've converted into kind of a big agritourism aspect. And you can see underneath the little ledge there that it's $15.99 to come to their farm for their experiences through the summer, and through October is the big month. They do a huge amount of traffic through just 1 month there. But when you say $15.99, will people pay that to come? Well, you're starting to compare yourself with going to a movie or taking people out, and people will pay these amounts. And these are the things that where you start to move up your price, up what you can get for your products, up the value chain a little bit. How most people set prices are, frankly, a lot of people just guess. And unfortunately, that's a bad way to do it, but many people do it. Bean counting is another one, and that's the cost plus kind of thing. And the hard part about this is then people get really particular on the farm or in your business, and you start to count everything, and it makes your staff go crazy, and it's very difficult to keep track of everything, and some decisions get made when you go this route that are very difficult. Following the crowd is another one, and I can use an example of this. When I was first working, the company, the greenhouse business that I was in Manitoba, we started a landscape construction company, and one of the things we were trying to do was to figure out, well, what's the rate we're going to charge people? And my boss goes, well, we're going to charge $25 an hour because that's what everybody around here is charging. And I worked it out, and I said, we can't turn the truck on for $25 an hour. If we charge $25 an hour, we can't do this. So we had to look at ways of adding value to get away from the crowd. And then what will the market bear? Sometimes the market will bear things, and sometimes it won't. So that's a guessing game when you're with price. Success pricing strategies are, you really need to understand that target customer best and understand what they want and what they're willing to pay for. You need to set the price for the customer, not the product, because everybody's going to be a little bit different. The same product to different customers has different value. Then you need to differentiate, as we were mentioning. You need to value add, and you need to work towards memorable experiences and connections. And those can be in a lot of different ways. You can move your products through these three different methods here. The other big question that you need to always be asking is, can I manufacture this product for a price the market is willing to pay? Because you always need to go back and look at efficiencies and working to keep your prices low and competitive, so that you're not just trying to take inefficiencies and to try to get paid more for those. So can you manufacture your products for a price the market is willing to pay? So to do that, you need to know your real costs. I'm not saying don't bean count, but just don't be anal bean counting is basically what I'm saying. You need to know your labor costs. You need to know your production costs, what it costs you to make that product. You need to know your freight. You need to know the overhead costs. You need to know your debt costs, and you need to know what it costs to marketing and sales. And lots of times people don't count all these things when they're looking at pricing their products. They forget that there's a freight cost, or they forget that there's marketing and sales costs, and that's something else. So you need to know all these costs if you're going to price properly. The lowest price is not the law. You can't compete on price. It's a death spiral. There's too many people out there with resources that have more money than you do to compete with you. So competing on low price is just going to put you out of business, and you're going to be gone. Low price is not a substitute for good marketing efforts. It's a lot of work to actually go and market your products, but that's how you get the value, and you're going to get the higher prices for your products. You need to be making money for marketing and growth. So if you're not getting a good price, you're not having that money there to market your product and for the growth. I'd like to give you an example of what happens if you drop your price. And for example, a gross margin of most businesses producing things would be, a good one would be 40% or 50%. But when you drop your selling price, if your gross margin is 40% and you drop your selling price by 10%, that's not very much. Think about that. Then you'll need to increase your sales by 33.3% to make the same gross profit. So every time you drop your price, you need to make sure that it's increasing your sales. You're doing things that are going to make your sales go up, or it's not worth it doing it. You need to find ways to make that add value that it's going to increase your sales. Is your price right? Well, how do you check if your price is right? The way I'd say you need to be looking at it is saying, are people giving you checks? Are you actually getting paid? You're getting cash in your hand on the barrelhead. That is an indication that your price is right when people are paying you. Are you making a profit? So, everything that you're doing, is there a return in the end for you? Can you pay your taxes? Sometimes people forget about this, but if you're not pricing right and you're not pricing enough, you're going to find that you're not able to pay your taxes properly, and you'll be zipping into your HST fund, and things just aren't going to work out for you. You're going to have problems down the line. Are your sales growing? If your sales aren't growing, you're not having the money to actually invest in growth and move your business forward. And are you solving important customer problems? Because if you're solving those problems, you're probably getting paid a good value for what you're doing. The key is to offer solutions to real problems your customers have. If we get down to the basics, you're not selling products, you're selling solutions for people. So an example I could give is, if you're selling drills, are you selling drills, or are you selling holes the drills make? In reality, if you could get those holes without the drill, you wouldn't need the drill, and you probably wouldn't have it. So those are the things that you got to start to think about, is like, what are you selling? You're selling, what's the solution you're selling? How do I address that to my customers' problems so that they see value in that and they're willing to pay me properly for that? The bigger problem is that the bigger the problem is, the more the customers will pay. And when you look at these HelloFresh boxes or these food boxes that come, lots of times you'll hear people say, like, why would people pay that amount of money for that box? But it's obviously solving a problem for somebody. It's making it easy for them to make a meal. It's helping them make a meal if they don't know how to cook. There's a whole bunch of factors that are involved in that. And I have to remind you that people buy with their hearts first, and then they validate with logic and price. And an example I could give maybe would be a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Most people, I'm not a motorcycle person, but I watch enough people, the neighbors that have them, and people that are Harley Davidson motorcycle people love Harley Davidson. They like the name. And they're probably going to buy a Harley Davidson. So their heart is telling them to buy a Harley Davidson no matter what, whether the other bikes are cheaper or whatever. But then their logic kicks in, and maybe the price is where they start to look at when they start to figure out which model they're going to get. They may not get the fanciest model, they may get the lower end model, or they may get one somewhere in between. But people buy with their heart, and then they validate with logic. So it's really important with your products, and even food products do this as well, connect with people. Tell your story. Come up with a really great story. This is the Rum Runners distillery in Halifax. Like, you tell a story that connects with people, that pulls at their heart, that makes them think about things. This is the late Casey Van Dyke and Peter Van Dyke, and I had the privilege of working with those guys for many, many years and watched their product go from an idea to a concept in a market. And they had a great story. It's an interesting product. They were looking for to use a cull product and turned it into a product that was a health food product. And they were in the middle of nowhere, basically in Caledonia, in the center of the province. And they were able to take their product to the world. And in 2005, they got the Best New Juice Innovation in the World award from Council in Europe. Strategies to overcome price resistance. Changing the presentation. So for example, if you look at the corn that is in a husk at the top, that's one price, that's one market you're going to get, but there's also, as you move down to the better product here, as I put it in this diagram, you take the husks off for people. And many people have a problem with how do I dispose of the husks, or what do I do with them? Or they have arthritis or things and they have difficulty peeling things, and they'll pay a little bit more or give you a different price for that product. If you move it over to, you put a skewer on that corn and cut it up so it's ready to go on the barbecue, you've saved people time and made it very easy for them to use it. It's worth more again. And then what's the wow? It could be the next level that you could take it. Packaging size is another thing to work with price. If you notice, when a good example would be blueberries when they come out. Usually they're when they first come out, when there's lots of them on the market, there's a big box. It's for a higher value. And then as the market goes along and the supplies go down, the packages change and they get smaller and smaller. But surprisingly, the price doesn't always get cheaper and cheaper as it goes down. So people are getting more value. So part of it is looking at the types of packaging that you're using. Now, I'm not promoting single-use plastics here, but it is a way to start to think about how I can get more value. Is I don't have to just sell it in that standard box I always did. I can change the value by changing the size of my package. Repositioning my product so that it is in a different market than it is now. There's lots of different ways you can put it into a higher price product market or go after a different customer. Understand moving it to a lower quality product if you want to, if that's maybe the more of the products that you have. Or maybe you're going to be in all of these markets, or some of your products are going to be in many of them. It's always interesting when you look at visiting food facilities, especially farms, and you see the products coming out and you go, wow, you know, all the really good products get exported out or sent to the best markets. And sometimes what we see at the other stores are the lower quality products. But so people are getting different values and they're moving things around for different price options. Unique selling proposition or value proposition reflects the benefits of how products add, or how value is added to your, or how value is added for the customer is your benefit. And then your features are really things that make that product value. So an example I could give you would be if your car had airbags and it had 20 airbags, those are features. And most people don't really worry about how many features they are. They're looking for the benefit of it all, of when I'm in an accident, those 20 airbags are going to save my life. So this is where you need to start to think about with your unique selling proposition is how do you connect with that customer so that they understand the benefits and they're not just stuck on the features. Here's another way of things that are happening where people are getting a better price or more value, I guess, out of the marketplace is companies like Driscoll are going to the grocery stores and saying, give us the PO and we will do the rest. So basically, you give us the PO number and we will source the product, we'll make sure it's on the shelf, and we'll do all those things. So we'll make sure there's good displays, we'll make sure the product's there when it's needed, and it's ready to go, and you've solved the problem for that customer. Competitive advantages. And they're important that you have and create some competitive advantages because it protects your price. And you have to remember that your product is not a business, so your business needs to be competitive as well. So products are going to come and go over time, but you need a strong business in support of everything. So if you have a profitable business, it means you've got the product's price right because you've got money coming in to make it profitable. Set the price for your target customers, not your product. So again, this is going back to understanding your customers really well and knowing what they'll pay and what they want, and not just pricing the product, but pricing it for that target customer, because they could be willing to pay much more than you think. And one of the things I always find with farm businesses is that people do often tend to think on the cheap side, and oh, I wouldn't pay for that or whatever, but it's not you that's buying these products, it's somebody else. So think about the people that are buying your products, what will they pay? And who says they won't pay more? If you look at these apples that are from Scotian Gold, and I'm one of these anal people that actually opens the package and starts to put the pieces all together and see how much apple is in this package or this orange, and you're getting a higher value for this product, or you're getting a higher return for the product by adding unique values. Coffees. How many people can make a pot of coffee at home, but yet they still go out and order one every day? In my community, they've had to actually build a third lane on the road because there were so many accidents of people going in to buy coffees every day. But the amount of money that people are prepared to pay for something, you'd be quite surprised. Water. When we bottle up water now, it's more per liter than a liter of gasoline, and it's taking water and maybe just filtering it and putting it in bottles, where gasoline is going through all the extensive refinery process and being shipped to markets. People are willing to pay more than you think for your products. Honeycrisp apples. This is $3.99 a pound here, but last winter I saw them for $5.99 a pound. And this is by taking something and differentiating it in the marketplace, you're getting a higher value for it. I want to talk about markup and margins for the next few minutes because it's often a misunderstood term. And why margins? And margins are the language of retailers. And retailers look at margins because they calculate everything, the cost of everything. They run a really tight ship. Retail grocery stores, their net profit is only about 1.5% at the end of the year, so they have to be really tight on things. But they also want to know how much profit they make on the selling price, not their cost. So when you're looking at markups, you're usually going from your cost up. Margins are going from the selling price down. And there's a difference in this. And I'll go through a little example here to share that with you. How you set your profit, or how much profit you want is going to depend on your markup or your cost covering. Sorry. You need to set your profit so you want to mark up over your costs. And that's a basic here. Sorry, I'm getting a little shell shocked here. Margins versus markup in retail. The margin example I'm going to use here is the cost of the product is $2. You're selling it for $3.50. So the retail margin is, to get to your retail margin, you're going to take your selling price minus your cost, and you're going to divide it by your selling price again. Now there's calculators and little profit wheels that you can use to figure this out, but this is the mathematical formula. So if your retail selling price is $3.50 and your cost is $2, and then you're going to divide it by the selling price again, it'll give you a margin of 43%. So if a product is selling for $3.50 and it costs you $2, the margin is 43%. Now markup, if we use the same example, and the cost is $2 and it's selling for $3.50, your retail markup is your selling price minus your cost divided by your cost. So $3.50 is your selling price minus your $2 cost divided by your cost again means that there's 75% markup. So you can see that if you're talking margins or markup, there is a difference, and people get confused by the terms often. Here's just another way to look at it. If we're comparing markups and margins, the markup is always more than the margin in the percentage. But if you compare them here, you can see that a markup of 100% is only a margin of 50%. So if somebody's talking a margin of 100% or a margin of 50%, and you're thinking a markup of 50%, there's a difference. So you've got to get that clear when you're pricing, and so you have to understand what your customer wants and what they're looking for. And here's another example again, just comparing margins and markups. If we go along the top one again, if you're just using margins, just assuming that the top one was all margins, your cost is $2, your producer margin is 50%, so you're going to sell it for $4, so you're making $2. The distributor margin is 25%. They're going to sell it for $5.33. The retailer margin is 35%. It's going to retail for $8.20. If you come down to the markup, if your product cost is $2 and your producer markup is 100%, it's still only $4. Your distributor markup is 25%. Now, they're going to sell it for $5, and you notice there's a difference there. And the retail markup is 35%. It's going to sell for $6.75. So there's quite a difference there in the price if you're talking markup or margin. Typically, producers look at markup because they're coming from their costs and going up. Retailers are looking at margin because they're looking at the selling price and what they can get for it. So you need to understand that there is a difference between these two terms. To get it right, it's important. Price and margin impact your G3 outcomes. And when I say G3, what I mean is your gold. The first G is your gold, your ability to earn a good living for your family. If you don't price properly, you're not going to have enough money that you're going to be able to support your family and give them a good living. Number two is the gold watch. If you don't price properly and you don't understand margins and markups, you're not going to be able to put money away for your retirement because you won't have enough money. And the third one is, the final G is the gold mine, or your assets. You need to accumulate and position your business to sell or pass on to somebody else. You need to have proper pricing so that you're making more money, that you can actually have your gold mine, you can have your gold, and you can have your gold watch, which are super important for most of you as you're going forward. Now, just to kind of wrap this up, we don't want to get trapped by our dogma or thinking about price. This is my old dogma. He passed away a few years ago, but Sam was not trapped by dogma at all. He was basically thought he was a human, and he could probably do just about anything that he wanted to. So getting caught in our price and worrying that our price is dictated to us by somebody else, that we can't change it, that is throwing darts. I hope I've been able to show you a little bit today that it's much more. There's much more looking at the value. You need to go back and you need to look at your customers and understand your customers really well, what they want, what they're prepared to pay, and how much they value your products. Then you need to start to go back and look at your costs. Can I manufacture this product for what the customer is willing to pay? And then all these other costs and things, can I get it to market? Can I do all these kind of things, are all factors into the price. Then it comes down to looking at these margins and what are the margins that our customers need to get. It depends on the product. If you're in selling to a retailer, some of them are looking to get 35% margins, some are 50, some are maybe even more, and depending on the category that you're in. Some categories are less, but you need to understand that and it'll help you in your pricing. Pricing is a logical looking at all these different aspects of where I can get to. And then you're going to get to the point and you can say, okay, how do we add value to this and make it so that these people can pay this price? And there's always a point where you have to maybe adjust things a little bit, and you're negotiating back and forth. But your price is not just always dictated to you. You do have some input into it, and you do need to know what your costs are so that you can actually move to that next level and be comfortable, and to be able to achieve that. Put some gold in your pocket, get that gold watch for your retirement, and build that gold mine assets for your future. So I'm just going to leave you with a little parting quote here, that the successful person gets up in the morning, goes to bed at night, and in between gets to do what they want to do. It's a quote from Bob Dylan, and I hope that if you get your price right, it'll allow you to live that dream. Thank you, and we're prepared to take some questions if there are.
Great, thanks, Gary. We're going to open up the question period now, so please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. I'll actually start it off. So Gary, for distributor margins, I know it differs per area people are selling in, but is there a minimum margin for a retailer that people could account for up front? Like, what's the minimum margin that a retailer is going to take?
Well, distributor and retailer are different here.
Right, sorry.
So often somebody needs to use a distributor to get from your place to the retailer.
Right.
Typically, those margins, they could be markups. Sometimes they look at markups and margins. It's a little hazy in there sometimes, but that's what you have to ask those questions to find that out. Typically, somebody's looking at 20% for dry products, maybe 25% for refrigerated products as a distributor. When you go to the retail, again, it's going to depend on the product category as well. So if you have dry goods, the markup may be, or the margin may be as little as 10 or 15% or whatever. But as you go to most of the food products, if you're going to perishable products, they tend to be 35 up to 50% for those products. If you get into deli specialty things, they often are even higher as you're there. So when you think about that and what that product's going to sell for at the end, you know, if a product's selling for $4 and they're getting you know, the 50% margin, they're basically expecting to pay $2 for it. So this is one of the important things when you're starting to price your products, is that you think about, okay, even as you're manufacturing or thinking about your product, how much money am I actually going to be able to make in the end? It helps you choose the channel that you go to. For example, you may say, I can't afford to sell to these guys. I have to find another channel. I need to sell direct to the consumer. It could be farm markets. It could be another an on-farm outlet. And those are the ways that you make the money that you need to. And not everybody is going to be able to sell to the chain store.
So we have a question that was submitted here, and it is, what are some tactics you can use to test prices that the customer is willing to pay?
Well, I think one of the best ways to do this, and I really am a strong believer in the farmers markets, is that, you know, spend a little bit of money, it's probably a few bucks to get a table, and take some products to the farm market and ask people. Put your product in front of people. Don't be scared. Don't have preconceptions. Just say, look, this is my product. I want you to try it. And then you can start asking people. You can have different prices. You can try different prices from week to, for over a period of a few weeks, and see what people at different markets and see what people will pay, and see how much resistance there is. But it's, again, you don't want to just worry about how much will they pay. You need to go back and think about, who is this product for? What are they? What are their characteristics, their lifestyle, their avatar, if you want to call it? And how much are they willing to pay for other products that are similar to this? Competitors' products, you're starting to look at all those different things as well. So it's one of those things that you need to get little focus groups together. You can start by asking people that you know. The downside about asking people that you know are that you know them, and they don't want to hurt your feelings. And sometimes even farmers markets that are in your neighborhood, the people don't want to hurt your feelings as well. I really think that, you know, you need to get to the outside of your region, and you start to look at things in other places. And it never hurts to go out and into the grocery store and just see what other people are paying for products. And if you're, most people that I would work with, the price in the grocery store is the minimum price that you would actually be selling your product for, because your product is going to have more value than that, and you're going to add value to it.
Right. So someone added on to that question and said, what about online e-commerce when you can't see the customer and get face-to-face interaction?
Well, I guess online e-commerce is an interesting way as well. I think when you put that price out there, you're going to probably, more than anything online, you're going to get some feedback from people from all over the place about what your product is or isn't. But I think if you're putting it on there, you want to have done your research and maybe tested it offline before to have a really good feel about it. It comes down to, you can't sell this product for less than it costs you to produce it, and you have to be able to make some profit and money no matter what. So I think testing it online is one way, but it's probably difficult. I would say I would test it offline at farmers markets or in little local stores if I could, to get an idea first of what it's going to sell for.
Okay, another question is, should I account for my own time when calculating the cost of a product? If so, how do I decide on a wage per hour?
Well, definitely you should figure out your own cost per hour, and you should be including that in the product. If you're not, what you have to think about is at some point you're going to want to get to the place where you're going to replace yourself. You're going to have to hire somebody to do this product for you. And that would be maybe the best way to look at it, is that how much would it cost if I hired somebody else to replace me to do this product? Is that minimum wage? Is that $15 an hour? Is that $20 an hour? Is that going to be $25 an hour? And if it's $25 an hour, that's the factor that I would be using into my cost. If I have to hire somebody else to do this, well, I do something else.
Right.
So you need to look at that for sure.
Oh, another one just came in. I am looking to get distributors internationally to carry and sell my product. What suggestions do you have for setting distributor prices? I know some companies do profit sharing.
What I have found over the years is some of the companies will do different deals with you to get going. But what you have to remember when you're going into an international market with your product and it's new to that market, that distributor is not that interested in taking a risk on your product. Probably doesn't even matter if it's in this country. The distributor, his job is to move a product from point A to point B. So he's basically taking it from either his warehouse where you put your product, and he's taking it to the customer at somewhere else. And his job is to try to sell that product. In some cases, it depends on the agreement that's there. But they're not really in the business of taking a big risk. So lots of times you'll find that they'll say, well, pay me a certain amount of money until the commissions start to come in and equal that amount, and then we'll stop having to make that retainer fee, basically. That's sometimes what you come across in foreign countries. Most of them are going to have a number that they want to work with, and it's really going to be coming down to each individual distributor, the deal that you can make with them. Partly, you need to do a lot of research into what markets they actually have, because my experience has been that when you go to some of these other countries, the people will say, oh yeah, we can do this or we can do that or whatever, and they're just looking for some money from you, or they're trying to get your product in at a real inexpensive cost. But it's no different when you go to a country like than here. Somebody's got to get that product from point A, and they've got to get there. There's a cost to it. If you're not paying a reasonable cost to make it happen, it's probably not going to go at the service. You're not going to get the service that you want, and it's not going to be as successful. It's very costly to get products into those markets, and when you start to add in the distributors in some of these places, it can be a lot. So I would say that they're still going to want to make that 20 or 25% of what they're doing. Maybe you're going to find a broker that can actually go and knock on the doors, but he's not going to take possession of the product. A distributor typically receives the product and then takes ownership of it and moves it on to another customer for you. But the real reluctance that you get into in those markets is that people don't want to take the risk.
Another question here is, if my product is natural, is organic price tracker a good place to look for prices besides the grocery store?
I think so. I think you need to look everywhere that you can and to find out what people are selling for. But again, don't get stuck on just what other people are selling your products for. Some people sell a commodity product that other people will be selling and get a much higher value. I mean, if I could take an apple and say, and go to 5 different apple farms in the valley, and I bet you everybody's getting a little bit different for them. You know, there's the people that are selling it to the juice market and they're getting a low value. There's people that are selling it to the co-op and they just get a value there. But then there's other people that go out and they market and they do some brokering and those kind of things, and they get a little bit more for their product. There's people that sell direct to the customer and they're going to get the most for their products. So there's lots of different ways that people can get more value. The value can be with the different kinds of products that they have. So you need to look at those other prices, but think about value more than trying to, well, am I close to that other price, or you know, definitely don't go in a little bit below, or those things. But it means you have to go out and sell your product and your service and yourself.
Okay, next question. In an area with lots of incoming brick and mortar competitors, what tactics would you suggest to differentiate yourself besides discounts? Competitors are giving the discounts.
I think it's the connection with food. The biggest one with food is that it's the connection. And I'm not really sure the context of what your market is like in the question here. But for example, it's adding value through the connection. People with food, I'm always surprised at how little actually people are willing to sample their products and give some of their products away. It's part of your marketing budget. Like, one of the big rules in food is, like, they try it, they buy it. And if you're not sampling your products, I mean, sometimes there's reasons why you can't sample our products at markets or those kind of things. But if you're not sampling your products, you're missing a huge opportunity, because it actually starts to create a reciprocity with the customer, because they've tried something, you've shared something with them, then they feel an obligation in a sense to try, you know, buy your product or try it back. And it builds a relationship. Like, you need to build relationships more than those brick and mortar stores are. You need to give them more service, and that means that you can charge more for your products. It's not a low price game. Some places are really stuck on, well, we have to have the lowest price, and I know the consumer is gravitates towards food, tends to be shopping on price and those kind of things. But there are segments of people out there, and you just have to realize that maybe everybody isn't your customer. Maybe, you know, those people that are price shoppers are just not my customer. I could use the example, I'm always asked I deal with lots of apple farmers, and I'm always asked, like, well, you know, why don't you buy this big bag of apples that it's, you know, really good value, it's $10. And there's people that come in and will pay that price for those apples. But in my household, I don't really have a cold storage room. If I buy a big bag of apples, by the time I get through the apples, maybe halfway through the bag, the last half are getting soft and they're not all that good, and I end up composting them. So in reality, I just paid twice as much for the first apples that I ate. So I typically, as a consumer, look at what's that apple going to taste like, and I pay according to that. And that may be what you need to do, is look for those segments of consumers that are a little more interested in paying what you need to get for your product.
Another question came in, and it's, is there a way to add value and profit without adding packaging, especially a much higher package to product ratio?
I think you have to look at alternative packaging today if you're trying to get away from things that aren't recyclable. But again, it's the connection. Like, if you want somebody to connect up with you, you have to make it very easy for them to get it. If there's no packaging involved with it, how do I make that super easy for people? Like, I'm going to have to be willing to do a little bit more, maybe in recycling containers or bringing things back, and I may have to clean them more than I'm
Yeah.
used to doing. It's like the problem when you bring milk bottles back, then the milk bottles have to be cleaned, and you know, a big cost is actually just cleaning the bottles. You have to look at how you have to understand the customer really well as well. Like, and again, it comes back, everybody's not going to be your customer. There are certain people that would just love to be able to get products without packages, but you have to figure out how you're going to be able to connect up with them. And it's not always easy. It may mean that you actually have to deliver your products to them a little bit more. You have to get unique. Sometimes I've worked with some beef producers in Ontario where they wrap all their product in paper, and they do have they only sell their products by a box of meat. So for example, there's a $25 box and a $50 box, and then they actually have pickup locations into the city where they drive in and certain day, like people have already paid for the product before, and then they show up and pick it up, and it reduces some of the packaging, but it also gives people a connection to the farmer because the farmers are actually driving the trucks, delivering and talking to the people. So those are probably some of the best ways that you could do it. But again, it's going to come down to the relationships you can build with people and being willing to connect with people. If you're not willing to make that connection and spend time marketing your product and sharing your experiences and stories with people, it's really what people are looking for today is almost this experiential type of thing. Like if you could get them to come to if you're a farm, if you could get them to come to the farm, you could give them a great experience, which is what agritourism is all about. It's like, you know, giving them something to do, giving them something to see, and make sure there's something for them to buy. But they came to the farm and had their own baskets and containers, they could pick up the product and you don't have to have the package to go away. And, you know, maybe they're willing to do that. And those are the things that you have to find out with that group of customers. And maybe that's the kind of customer you want to attract, and all your advertising and promotion has to be towards that kind of person.
Right. There's a lot of factors.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So another one is sustainable packaging, such as glass, paper, cardboard versus plastic, consider value added at this point, or is it just standard now?
I would say those things are just standard. It's kind of like quality. Quality is just standard. Like if you don't have a quality product, you're probably not in the game. When I'm talking value, I'm really thinking about changing the product. Like you're changing it from a form. You know, the form of the product is maybe changing to something else, or you're adding some kind of service or benefit to people. Like, you know, why would I buy your product over anybody else's in the marketplace, and even the choice of not buying anything at all?
Yeah.
Like, why would I buy your product? Like, and you need to work at creating a value that when somebody sees your product, that it's really good. Like, I can think of products that I've come across, particularly in Western Canada, which is interesting because I'm visiting, and I've had some really amazing meat sandwiches. And just talking to Emily right here, right now, and thinking about that, my mouth is starting to water.
Yes.
And I'm starting to think about it. And that's really the kind of place you want to get with your products, is so that when somebody thinks about your product, they just actually think about it, their mouth starts to water and think, I've got to go there and pick that up. And it was actually another story I could give you is with the Honeycrisp apple. My neighbor across the street was one of the first people in Nova Scotia to produce Honeycrisp apples. And I used to go over there and pick up apples all the time. And I had to go from the Naples Valley up to Truro. It's a 2-hour drive one day. And I stopped in to get some apples because I was taking up to some of the people I was working with in Truro. And he goes, the Sanford farm goes, Peter Sanford goes, well, try these apples. Like, these are new. I want to see what you think about them. And he gave me these 2 nice big Honeycrisp apples. And this was like back in the 90s, the late 90s, when they were just first coming out. Well, I'm driving to Truro and I'm eating one of these apples. And this was even before I got to Windsor, I started eating this apple. And for the whole rest of the day, all I could think about is how do I get back home quick so that I can get some more of these apples because they're so good. And that's the kind of thing that really connects with those people to put your product in their basket. So.
Right. Okay, we're quickly going to answer this last question here, and it is, do you have any recommendations on how much of your profit you should be reinvesting back into marketing?
Well, I would say into marketing, you need to be investing. I'm going to put a caveat on it saying, I think you should be investing into marketing wisely. And you just need to invest the amount of money that you need to. I could say a percentage, like lots of times people will say 5 or 10% of their profit they'll be putting back into marketing. But you really need to be investing what's necessary to make whatever your goals are happen. Marketing is a black hole, like if you're not careful. You can put money on the advertising slide and you can spend a lot of money and not really see any results. I'm really keen on investing money into something that I can measure the results of. It's why I really like the internet today, is that it's giving you a tool which is relatively inexpensive compared to most other things. I mean, social media, you can put something on social media and you can tell by the people coming to your farm if it worked. I've had farmers tell me that it was going to rain, supposed to rain on Sunday, and I put on social media, we're not going to be open on Sunday. Turned out to be sunny on Sunday. I turned around and put on social media that we are open, and I put the video cam out to prove that it's sunny here and where they are versus maybe in the city, and hundreds of people show up that probably wouldn't have been there otherwise. So you've got powerful tools to make it happen. Email allows you connection. It allows you two-way connection. Like I can send Emily an email and I can ask her a question and she's going to respond to me. Most of the social media is you're just one way. You're sending information out, but you're not always getting response back. You can make connections and you can build relationships with things out there in many different ways. But what you need is a strategy of, this is what I want to achieve out of it. If I'm going to do all these things, what do I want the people to do? I want to ask them to come and do something. I want to ask them to go to the store and buy my product. I want to ask them to come to the farm so I can have a better connection and they can buy products. So, just to say that, 5 or 10% of my money should go into marketing, if you don't do it wisely, I would say don't even spend it at all.
Yeah, it's definitely about strategy.
That's definitely about strategy.
Okay, that was great. That was a lot of great questions that you guys submitted. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary, for presenting today and teaching us about the language of margins. If your question wasn't answered during this session, Gary and I's contact information is on the screen. Feel free to email us with your questions, and please use the subject line "Pricing for Profit Webinar" so we know where the question's coming from, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. We hope to see you again throughout our Take Your Product to Market webinar series. Our next webinar is next Thursday, February 20th at 2 p.m. It's on food safety successes getting started with our food safety team members, Elaine and Clarissa. You can find information for this webinar along with the rest of the series on our website. Thanks and have a great